Hi, this is Chris Peters for the Hampton History Museum, and I'm standing in front of a reproduction of the Palisade wall of Fort Algernon. Fort Algernon was built by the English in 1609 in what's now the city of Hampton. The fort would have been built out of rough cut or split timbers like the ones you see here. The walls probably were only about 8 to 10 feet tall, and it wouldn't have been a very large structure. Basically, it would have looked like a miniature version of Jamestown. Most of the early colonial forts in North America were triangular forts, just like Jamestown. You see this amongst the French, you see it quite a bit with the English, and even sometimes with the Spanish, these small triangular forts. They chose a triangle as the shape for the fort because it's the smallest shape you can make where you can defend all sides with a small number of people. Each of these triangular forts would have had a small bastion or tower in each of the three corners where the defenders could stand on platforms and fire their weapons down at people trying to attack the walls. So these small triangular forts would be found all over the coast in the early colonial period, and Fort Algernon is another example of that. So we don't know a whole lot about Fort Algernon aside from the rough descriptions given by the English, but Fort Algernon had a very specific purpose, and that we do understand pretty well. And to explain that, we're going to have to look at a map. So here we have the lower Chesapeake Bay. On the edge of the map, we see the Atlantic Ocean, the lower bay, and then here we have the James River, the York River, and all the way up here we have the mouth of the Rappahannock. And the English are going to be building everything in Virginia with defense in mind, but they're not trying to defend themselves from the people that are living here. In fact, when the English arrived in Virginia, they had hoped to have a good trade relationship with the Powhatan Indians. They knew that there were people living here. They even knew a little bit about their language, thanks to earlier expeditions to the area. And they're hoping to open up a good trade relationship with them. They are, however, concerned about the Spanish. And that's because what we call Virginia today, the modern Commonwealth of Virginia, is only one small part of what the English called Virginia 400 years ago, which spanned all the way from South Carolina to Maine. And that territory fell well within what the Spanish were calling Florida, which is basically all of North America. So the English are stealing this territory from Spain, and if the Spanish find out, they might come in and try to get rid of the English. Now, the Spanish aren't going to come from the south, they're not going to come from the west, they're going to be coming from the Atlantic Ocean. So any threat that the English face here is going to be coming from this direction. They have to find a spot that makes it easy to defend against those threats. Jamestown is all the way up here. It's about 40 miles inland from the mouth of the river, and by building Jamestown halfway up the navigable part of the James River, that helped with their defense. This is a position that isn't easy to attack, but they can make that defense even better by building a fort all the way down at the end of the river. So, Fort Algernon was built down here at what we call Point Comfort, the same place where today you're going to find Fort Monroe. Very good strategic spot. Any cannons that you put down at Point Comfort are going to protect both the mouth of the James River and the major shipping route up the Chesapeake Bay. Most of the water on this side of the Chesapeake Bay is quite shallow. You can't get very large ships in this water. And the same thing is true in the James River. The southern shore of the James River is quite shallow. So any ship that's going to come into Virginia and go up the Chesapeake Bay or up the James River has to come within a mile or so of Point Comfort. You put a couple of cannons there, you can stop them. So Fort Algernon was built down here at Point Comfort to protect against the Spanish coming in from the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the English never actually fought against the Spanish here in Virginia. The Spanish did send an exploratory mission in to Virginia in 1611, and some of the men from that expedition were actually captured by the English garrison at Fort Algernon. They were sent all the way back to England, where they were interrogated, and then eventually they were sent back to Spain. So these men survived their encounter with the English and went on to tell the Spanish government what had happened. So Fort Algernon is never actually going to be used in war against the Spanish, but it will get used against the Powhatan Indians. So the English had no intention of fighting against the Powhatan Indians when they got here, but the relationship that they were trying to build broke down pretty quickly, and Fort Algernon was only about a mile or so from the Powhatan town of Kecoughtan. So in the summer of 1610, the garrison at Fort Algernon, along with some fresh soldiers that had just arrived from England, are going to march overland just a mile or so to get to the town of Kecoughtan, where they attack and drive the people out. This is part of the First Anglo-Powhatan War, and by the end of that war, the English would have controlled most of Tidewater, Virginia. So Fort Algernon was built to protect against the Spanish, and instead ended up being used against the Powhatan Indians. For the Hampton History Museum, this has been Chris Peters. Thank you for joining me, and there'll be more videos to come.